Mayor, councillors, Ethna, all the local culture team here. Delighted to be here. Somehow or other, I thought I had visited every corner of the country in the last 2 years on the 1916 Odyssey, but somehow I didn't get to Fingal. So I'm particularly pleased to be here today. My job is really to explain to you what the programme is about, what underpins it, what our hopes and ambitions for it are, and to explain the structures of it, what it is, and to a certain extent what it isn't. The first thing to say is, I think, that it's a 5-year programme. It's 2017 to 2022, and that is actually quite important. This is not an agency, it's not a funding agency, it's not a quango, it's a programme, it's a government initiative, and it is deliberately established to endure for 5 years, and then it should be self-extinguishing. And the idea simply is that there's a big agenda of things to do, and there's a big sort of idea around mainstreaming, to shortcut it, mainstreaming culture across all strands of government. And the objective is that we get that done in 5 years. Now, we all know that realistically, you don't do a transformation of that scale in 5 years. So maybe there'll be a second iteration of this. But nonetheless, it is important that it is time limited, that it is self-extinguishing, and that we move on, hopefully having gone a long way towards achieving the big objective. So it is the legacy programme coming out of 2016. I'll talk very briefly about that. I don't think we need to say too much about that. I think we all understand that it was a year that was not what we expected it to be. It was much more expansive, much more enjoyable, much more deliberative, and much more engaging than I think we thought that it would be. It's also, there is a second parent to this, which is Culture 2025, which is the government's, the first kind of national long-term culture strategy. This work was ongoing while the Creative Ireland programme was being developed. So the two have been put together because the principles overlap to a very considerable degree. I won't read them out there. So Creative Ireland now becomes, for those of you who are familiar with it, becomes the implementation mechanism for Culture 2025. Anyway, just going back for a moment to 2016, this was something that, if you recall, back in 2014, when we were rather late getting around to this, that was something that looked potentially very fractious, potentially very divisive, full of political landmines. So there was a lot of anxiety about it at all kinds of levels. Those of us who are old enough to have experienced and remember 1966 would have been particularly concerned about it. All of those fears and anxieties proved to be unfounded, and it became a kind of a shorthand, a year in which we talked a lot about citizenship, identity, and culture. And that was really interesting. We talked about citizenship not so much in the technical terms of a Citizenship Act or anything like that, but in terms of the relationship between the individual and the state. We talked about identity, not just in terms of one particular identity or one particular strand of one particular identity, but of multiple identities and the complexity and the variety of identities that now form us as a people. And really, most surprisingly, so much of the year was suffused in arts and culture. We did not expect that. We didn't expect that the year would be so big. It became so big really because of the involvement of people like Ethna, who made it huge, and the local authorities generally. That was what made it a huge year. They took the basic framework of the programme and created programmes around the country. And I know that there was a huge, very successful programme here. But what transpired surprisingly was that so much of it was arts and culture based. And then when you look back and you reflect on that, it becomes clear that it was that centrality of arts and culture that helped us to navigate our way through what could otherwise be really very difficult discussions. So stories told through drama, literature, the arts, the visual arts, dance, became more interesting stories, deeper, richer stories, non-contentious, non-divisive stories. And there was a huge sense of people uniting around that broad sort of cultural event. So that's, it's something we're still too close to really explore the full meaning of it and where all of this came from, but it was a very surprising year, and I think it's just worth reminding ourselves of that, and that is really what underlines the year. So, you could say in a sense that 2016 begat Creative Ireland, but what begat 2016. And there were other things going on. One can't say that it was just the centenary year that led to this. There was a big event in 2015 as well, which I think many of us would agree did inform that kind of larger, expanding sense of identity and a kind of a spirit of generosity and of openness to difference and to otherness. And that, of course, was the marriage equality referendum in 2015, which undoubtedly changed the way that we talk about ourselves and to each other. And even for people who didn't come around to voting yes in that referendum, I think most of us, nearly all of us, I think, felt a certain pride in that spirit of generosity and openness, something that changed, a shift that happened in 2015. Personally, I think that informed 2016, made it easier to navigate difficulties and differences in 2016, and those two things in turn form a basis for what we're doing now. So Creative Ireland, what is it? These are just the words from the programme. You all have a programme in front of you. In a kind of a literal way, it's a high level, high ambition, all of government initiative. That's a really important part of it. Designed to mainstream creativity and culture in the life of the nation so that individually and collectively we can realise our full creative potential. That's it in a kind of a literal sense. Then drill down a little bit. So, what is it really? Well, what it is really, it's an individual and society well-being strategy. That's really what it is. It's a well-being strategy. And it's a well-being strategy, to develop that a bit more, that uses our cultural resources to elevate creativity. And what we're really talking about is offering a meaningful, values-driven quality of life for all who live here. That's the kind of idea that underpins it. But that is really the centrality of it, that it is a well-being strategy using cultural resources to elevate creativity. And it's something else. It is a kind of facilitated invitation to everyone, to get involved in our cultural life. That's a really, I think, centrally important aspect of it. I'm going to take you on a small little navigation through the development of the identity around this. So the whole idea that culture provides that common ground where everybody is welcome to participate. So for society at large, recognising individual expression and so on. So there's our common ground, the space that culture opens up in which everyone is welcome to participate. We open it up and it becomes Creative Ireland, and then you can bring whatever it is you have or whatever it is you want to bring into Creative Ireland, whether it is visual arts or music. Obviously, children are going to be central to it. I'll talk about that. So that is it. That's the idea, and that then is the identity that we created. Now, again, going back to this thing about it not being an entity, Creative Ireland never sits on its own in isolation. It will always be doing something in partnership with other people. It's a collaborative exercise. That is absolutely at the core of it, and I'll come back to that. So you shouldn't ever see that identity just sitting on its own. It'll always be in partnership with something else, whether it is state agencies or external non-governmental organisations or local authorities. That is absolutely core to it. So how does it work? It's a very unusual beast, this, because what we're doing is we're kind of turning normal approaches to big initiatives on their head, and we're doing it the wrong way around. We are kind of assuming the evidence base for what we're saying, that basic proposition that cultural creativity is good for us all and is good for the well-being of individuals in society. And we know that evidence base is out there. It's not that we're not interested, we absolutely are, and in the course of the next 5 years we will be, well, particularly in the next year, we'll be gathering in and building that evidence base. So we just kind of took that for granted. Unlike in the UK, where Nick Sirota, the outgoing chair of the director of the Tate, has taken over as chair of the UK Arts Council, and he is spending the first year and a half of his chairmanship doing something similar, but he's creating, first of all, a commission in Durham University. It's going to be called the Durham Commission, and they're going to do all that thinking piece first and building the evidence base. And then when they get past that, they'll presumably create strategies for implementation and action plans. We've done all three together. So we're assuming the evidence base, we've gone straight into strategies, and we've a whole list of actions that we're going to start delivering, and a big, ambitious list of them. They're on page 30 of that programme, to be delivered this year. And in reality, a huge amount has to be delivered before we break for the summer, because we come back after the summer and we're into the next budgetary cycle, and we have to have a lot done in order to establish the credibility and the credentials of this and the value of it. So that's why we're running so hard, going around the country, doing these things, getting programs moving, really trying to mobilize as many people, individuals, organizations, but particularly the local authorities are so instrumental in this. This is, I think, the 28th of about 34 public meetings, 34, 35 public meetings that we'll do around the country, and they are absolutely crucial in creating that support base and network for what we're doing. Again, the evidence base, I'm not going to go into this, but we're dealing with big terms. What does well-being mean? What does community mean? If we're talking about the place of heritage and all of this, what does that mean? What does creativity itself mean? What is the meaning of citizenship in a country that's changing so rapidly? And what is culture itself? So all of those things, all of those discussions, this is a dynamic 5-year program. Nothing is set in stone. That document that you have is an unfinished piece of work, and you should regard it as such. It's just the first iteration of the idea. And it will continue to develop and evolve, and there will be innumerable opportunities to talk. Crinneanacoska was an opportunity to talk, but there will be academic conferences. There will be at least one major one every year, and probably lots of smaller ones. And there will be discussion groups here, I'm sure, in Fingal, and lots of opportunities to contribute to the development and the shaping of this program. And yes, there'll be one major conference in the autumn of this year. I just want to talk very briefly about some of the operating principles of this, because this is really important. There are 3 of them that are listed there. It really amounts to 5. Collaboration and communication are 2 different things. Community and empowerment and internationalization. The only one that I just want to focus on, but we're really serious about these. These words really matter a lot to us. And we're investing a huge amount of time and resources in all kind of 5 of those terms. Collaboration is really the big one. 2016 worked because there was huge collaboration across government, government agencies to government, local authorities to local government, local authorities to national government, agencies, arts organizations, community organizations all around the country. It was collaboration on a scale that I don't think had ever been seen before for a national initiative. And it was really productive, and people enjoyed it. And in fact, the focus on collaboration for this program actually came from the council teams themselves. We were doing a review of 2016 a few months ago, at the end of the summer actually last year, and all of the local authority teams said that to us, that what they really liked about it was that the arts officers, the cultural people, the heritage, the librarians, community activators, all collaborating, working together. And they said to us, we really need to do more of that. And that was a message we got from all around the country and from government itself. And that's why this is structured the way it is. And I'll just talk about that very briefly in a moment. Well, actually, I'll say it now. The core thing about this is the structure. It is an initiative that is chaired by the Taoiseach. And it includes a cabinet subcommittee that is arts, education, enterprise and employment to capture the creative industries. It also includes foreign affairs, the Department of Children and Youth Affairs. I've probably left out 1 or 2. It should include the Department of Health, and I hope it will be as we go on, and maybe other areas of government too. So this is really a radically different way of working, and it is something that is central to the program. And then there are the informing principles. Again, these are not set in stone by any means. This is a kind of a best guess at articulating what our informing principles are, but they will continue to evolve and shape. But these culture and democracy depend upon each other. That's a big one. It's something I think that most of us believe, but it's a really important idea, I think, to take hold of. We are all co-owners of our cultural and creative infrastructure. So a big piece about this is democratizing our cultural infrastructure. I mean, we've spent literally billions since the foundation of our state on the creation of this fantastic arts and culture heritage. But what percentage of our population really believe, really feel that they are co-owners of that? So that's a big piece of this. Culture is a human right. There's a big legal dimension to this. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The right to people to participate in culture, in arts and culture. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Our own constitutional amendment on the rights of the child. So, we should be articulating, we probably will, in the course of this project, articulate a legal charter in relation to this. This isn't a kind of an optional thing. It's something that we have signed up to a long, long time ago. How old is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? I think we're coming up to the 70th anniversary next year. So, this is something that we should really be taking very seriously. Arts and culture are not some kind of optional add-on for some people and not for others. There is a serious kind of rights element to this. And then the belief that participation in arts and culture is essential to well-being, and there's a big evidence base for that, and cultural opportunity must embrace equality and diversity. There's some overlaps on that. It can't be a human right unless it does embrace equality and diversity. Okay, so going quickly then on to the strategy. This is the strategy piece, 5 pillars: enabling the creative potential of every child, enabling creativity in every community. Those are the 2 big ones that were probably, that constitutes well over half the program. It's probably in all likelihood 70% of the program. The 3rd pillar is about capital investment in creative and cultural infrastructure, neglected sector, particularly since the crisis in 2007, 2008. So there's a big kind of capital deficit to be made up there. The 4th pillar is really about the creative industries more generally, but it is starting with one particular industry, and that's media production. And the 5th one is about our global reputation. It's about what we say about ourselves to the outside world. So pillar 1, the creative potential of every child. It should really be every child and young person, because we're talking about from 0 years up to 18. And there's a big promise in this. The evidence base is there. I'm just alluding to this. One piece of the evidence base, this longitudinal study that has been conducted by, commissioned by the Arts Council, conducted by the ESRI, which shows what we all know, that children engaged in arts are happier kids. They go on to have better academic self-interest, self-image, and more positive attitudes. So, we're not just talking about the creativity, sort of artistic creativity. We're talking about engendering creativity, uplifting creativity. And it's a creativity that might manifest itself not in the arts and culture, but in sciences and mathematics, in whatever, engineering. So it is about building that base of culture-informed, culture-driven creativity that then spreads out through all aspects of our lives. You could also say that it should be more aptly be titled "Trying Not to Stifle the Normal Natural Creativity That We Are All Born With." Anyway, the big promise in this that the government has subscribed to and that Taoiseach has articulated several times is that at the end of the 5-year programme, every child in Ireland will have access to tuition in music, art, coding and drama. Now that is obviously a very large promise. And there are 2 aspects to it. If it is going to be universal, if it is going to be for everyone, it has to be delivered through the formal education system. The informal system is fantastic. There's music generation, there's fighting words, there are any number of arts organisations and arts offices around the country that do amazing programmes with kids. There are the libraries, the network of city and county libraries all around the country that do great things. There are youth theatre, youth choirs, so many things. But if you really want to get scale, if you want to reach every child, you have to do it through the school system. So we are already deeply immersed in transactional negotiations with the Department of Education to make this happen. And I won't go into it because it is kind of technical, but it is well underway, both at for the primary level and post-primary level, looking at developing the Arish things, which some of you will know, expanding that out into every school in the country, developing teacher-artist partnerships, making those much more expansive so that we are reaching the entire school system, and a number of other initiatives as well. So, artists are really an important, central part of this. It is a serious effort to bring arts and culture right into schools where they should be, and to make it universal. It's a big piece of work, really ambitious. There'll be a major pilot program rolled out over the next 2 years, which will be in 150 schools around the country, and then the plan is to roll it out to all 4,000 schools in the country over the following 3 years. Requires big resources, but the political commitment is there. Technically really difficult to deliver, but there is the determination there to do it. It will also embrace all of the principles of the Charter for Arts and Education. This is an area, for those of you who have been involved in arts and education, it has stuttered and stumbled for 40 years. I mean, you could go back to 1978 and Kieran Benson's report, which articulates so clearly all of the principles. but it's still there, and the language of it is still completely relevant today. And there have been many other iterations of that since, most recently the Charter for Arts and Education, but this is really being embraced now, and the principles of the Charter for Arts and Education are being taken into the formal education system. And then the informal piece of that is bringing together the whole informal sector. So we will be working with we'll be starting very soon, possibly as early as 2 weeks, when we will bring as many representatives as we can of the informal sector. So all of those music organizations, visual arts, the fighting words, literary organizations, everybody concerned with the informal, out-of-school aspects of children, arts, culture, education, to really get best thinking, to create the networks, and to see how the best practice from the informal sector might inform and help develop the formal sector. And again, it is about that whole concept of collaboration, which we keep repeating, to try, because even in the informal sector, people don't know what each other are doing. Much less does the formal system have a full grasp of what the informal sector is doing. So that's a big piece of work in itself, of creating that network. And that is something that we want to do. We have this big ambition to create some kind of a platform. It isn't designed yet, but the need for it has become so clear as we take this around the country. The need for some kind of a platform online that maps cultural creativity throughout the country, so that if you're in Roscommon and you want to set up a youth orchestra, that you can find musicians, you can go straight in, find the musicians, find rehearsal spaces, find festivals around the country where you might get audiences, and so on. So it's something that people will be able to enter into, see what is happening, see what they can do, put themselves into it, make themselves available for whatever their own particular activity is. I won't go through the Arts in Education Charter. You probably know it. Many of you do, I'm sure, do know it. The second one is enabling culture and creativity in every community, and that is the bit that the local authorities are doing. So every local authority they've done amazing things already. I mean, 2016 was such an eye-opener, but the capacity for delivery that exists within the local authority isn't, I think, widely appreciated, but is becoming, I think, better known. And I think just doing these information sessions has increased the awareness of people of the extraordinary depth and reach, the expertise of the local authorities in arts and culture and their reach. So that is a really important part of it. Place is really important. That is another aspect, another reason why we are putting this out all around the country. Everybody in Ireland identifies with place, maybe to a greater degree than we do in other countries. I don't know whether that is really true or not, but my experience would be that certainly smaller countries, there is a stronger tie to place. We certainly feel it very strongly in this country. Maybe it's because of our history of emigration or being on a western seaboard or whatever, but we do all remain attached to the place in which we grow up, and so much of our contemporary arts practice does derive from place, from heritage, from language. So that sense of place and locating the Creative Ireland programme locally is really core to what we're doing. And this notion that I spoke of before of democratising the ownership of our culture, of our creative infrastructure. So it's creativity in every community. Now, the centenary programme showed this to us, two really important aspects of our local authorities. For me, this was a real surprise because I've never worked in the public sector in this country before. I'm a private sector person, so I was walking into this really not having an appreciation of the reach and depth of local authorities. And they really are the primary instruments of community engagement, and they really do have enormous capacity and expertise for programme delivery, and it's really showing in arts and culture. So the Creative Ireland programme is really about building on those capacities. And one of the really crucial things that has happened already is that every local authority has created a culture team. There's a big, broad, effective, widely skilled culture team here in Fingal already established. That is a big step in itself, because until now, I'm not talking about Fingal necessarily, but a lot of council staff structures were such that you might have the heritage officer reporting to the director of planning and the arts officer reporting to somebody in parks and wildlife or whatever, and they didn't really work together. Now we have these culture teams. It's the fruits of that single initiative on their own are already becoming clear. And in many ways, it is the culture teams that are responsible for the large crowds that are coming to these meetings. Because suddenly it's not just the arts officer and it's not just the heritage officer, it's all of them. And that's a big change. that we're seeing big evidence of already around the country. So every county is going to be producing a plan as well, a short-term plan for 2017 and a long-term plan for the next 5 years. So it's building the network. Crinne na Cosca, you've seen it, hugely successful, not just in terms of numbers, but the public response to it and what people are saying about it, that there is a real sense of appreciation that this is something that we need. We do need a day every year, not a kind of a St. Patrick's Day type thing. A day when we reflect seriously on who we are, what we value, what we think are the big issues that we should be concerned with, and have fun. And showcase our culture. So that's what Crinne is about. It looks very likely after the success of this year that it is something that we will continue to do and develop, and it is something the local authorities here delivered it with a ridiculously short notice period. It was really, we asked them to do something impossible, and they did it. And it was an outstanding success. Pillar 3 is about the money. I'm not going to dwell on this. It is about making good the kind of capital deficit in our infrastructure. And we're starting with the national cultural institutions as a natural place to begin. But we'll be looking, as we go on, more at the capital requirements of infrastructure around the country as the programme progresses. We also want to broaden and deepen the meaning of capital expenditure because it is an important distinction in budgeting, the difference between capital and revenue expenditure. So capital will be broadened to include heritage sites, but crucially also collections, and most crucially of all, digitisation. And there was a huge appreciation, I think, last year of the importance of digitisation. The National Library had a huge programme which really made the collections accessible to millions of people around the world rather than just a couple of thousand that might have otherwise entered the doors. And I think all around the country people now see that we're into a new era of what cultural institutions are about, that digitisation creates completely different possibilities. So there will be massive amounts of digitisation in the coming years. Pillar 4 about the creative industries, but a focus on making Ireland a centre of excellence in media production. That's where we're starting. It's somewhat opportunistic. It is because the Department of Arts and Heritage, et cetera, has commissioned a major international study, scoping study, on the Irish film and media sector. And that study is just about complete. It will come up, it will say, almost certainly, that there is huge scope for expansion of this industry. It's a natural one for Ireland. Behind every piece of media production, there's a story, there's a script. That's something that we're particularly good at, but it's not just that. We have the settings, we have the skills, and surely it is something for the future as well. Every child in Ireland knows how to make a short film at this stage. So it is something really that we can focus on and get a lot from. So Creative Ireland then, we would see ourselves as being kind of a platform to help to make this happen. And sometime in the next couple of weeks, actually, we're going to have a big kind of World Cafe event where we will be bringing together the entire sector. Lots of pieces in the sector, not wanting to single out organisations that never really talked to each other much before, even though they're really involved in the same thing of creating cultural content. But they are now, and through this initiative we're hoping to facilitate a lot more collaboration and networking and cross-fertilisation of ideas. So bringing the whole sector together to launch a big, major national initiative to drive this sector. That's really what this is about. Film production, animation, in which we're already very strong, as you know, TV drama. Those are the main things that we're going to be focusing on. So on to the last one, Pillar 5, unifying our global reputation. This is the one where a lot of people feel a little bit uneasy because it sounds a bit like a branding exercise. And this is where people can feel a little bit uncomfortable and say, well, oh, so now we're getting to the meat of it, and you're saying that what we're really about is tourism and promoting Ireland abroad and so on and so on. No, it isn't. What we are saying is that the way that we represent ourselves really matters. The stories that we tell about ourselves do really matter. And if you don't tell your own story, if you don't articulate what it is you believe in and what it is you do and what you think about the future, then somebody else will make up the story for you. And that it is really important that we shape our own narrative, particularly in these difficult times when national identities are tending to narrow and when we've had our own problems in terms of how we represent ourselves in recent years. People say lots of good things about Ireland and about the Irish, but there is also this feeling out there that the one thing that we're really good at is foreign investment. And we're really good at it because we've low corporation tax. And it's a small step from that to say, to question whether we really are good global citizens. Are we cheating with our low corporation tax? I don't believe we are, actually. These are kind of technical questions, but it is something where we've allowed our national reputation to be somewhat damaged, and people are saying things about us that are maybe not the way that we would like ourselves to be represented. So anyway, the long and the short of it is that we are looking at what other countries are doing in terms of expressing a narrative about who they are and what they value. We've looked at countries like New Zealand and a lot of the Scandinavian countries to see how they shape. They all have these portal websites like Finland.fi, which is the first kind of entry point for anybody who is interested in Finland, Denmark, or Sweden, or whatever the country is. And you begin to see how the country represents itself. And it does have an impact then on how the world sees it. So we have lots of agencies in Ireland who all do really terrific work, and they all express themselves rather differently. They have a slightly different narratives about what Ireland is. And they do it very well in terms of representing what they do. But we haven't made a concerted effort to tell our own story and to shape our own narrative. And it is really important because, if you say something that is solid, that is aspirational perhaps, that is something that is values-based about yourself, and if you say it well and if you articulate it strongly, it becomes something that is expected of you, and it becomes something that you expect of yourself. So it is actually really important that we articulate what it is we are and what we believe in, what we want for our country, values, that is then kind of reflected back to us as an expectation so that we do more of it and it becomes a kind of a self-reinforcing thing. So that is why it is so important to articulate the things we believe in, that we are a creative people, intellectually creative, curious thinkers, that we do have a heritage, that we do have credentials in representing ourselves as thinking, creative, thoughtful people who value arts and culture. So that, what is it really about? If you say that, what is it that we want to be able to say about the country? We'd like to be able to say that Ireland is a great place in which to live primarily, in which to grow up. That's what you'd really feel proud of being able to say. To invest in then as a secondary thing, and a place in which to study, to do research, because in Ireland you can discover authentic culture and creativity and all that goes with that. So that when people are making choices about where to live, where to locate maybe 200 PhD level people for the next area of research in a particular business, where are you going to go? Where would they like to bring up their kids? Where would they like to live? Where would they have a good quality of life? That's what you would like people to think about Ireland. So that's why it is important. And when you do that, it tends to be reinforcing. You're getting a larger interest in culture. You're creating wider audiences, more opportunities for artists and creators. So that's why we think it is important and to bring it all together. You can approach this as arts and culture for their intrinsic worth, which is what most of us, I think, believe in. We believe in that, in the intrinsic value of arts and culture. But we're always contending against the people with the purse strings who say, well, you have to prove to us that it's going to deliver. It's going to deliver jobs, it's going to deliver tourism, it's going to deliver creative industries, whatever it is. And really, it's a false binary way of looking at it. The two things do feed into each other. That's what it's about. And it is about beliefs. I've articulated what I think are the things that most of us believe in here. But again, this is language that is evolving, that is being shaped, and that is by no means set in stone. So we do believe in this country, I think, in the importance of memory, heritage, and culture as foundation stones for creativity and for community. We do believe in the innate creative capacities of every individual person. And I think we do believe in the transformative power of the arts to strengthen identity, self-worth, and all of those things. So it is about those beliefs. It is about articulating those things. We have already launched this website. It's called Ireland.ie. I'd encourage you to look at it. It was launched by the Taoiseach on St. Patrick's Day in Washington, and it is that portal website looking at Ireland. And the message of it is that Ireland is a place where you will find a rich and vibrant culture infused with memory, heritage, and tradition. And then the way that the website is structured is really through stories rather than agencies. So it's drawing people in through stories of what Ireland is about. So that's the program, broadly speaking. in summary then, I think what we're saying, and this is the conversation, I think what we're saying as an opening of the conversation is, let's not talk just about the arts, let's talk about creativity. And let's be specific when we talk about it. Let's talk about deliverables, real things that can happen now and over the next 5 years that can change the landscape of arts, culture, and creativity. And let's recognize the crucial role of the arts, and particularly arts integration, integrating the arts into our lives, and the connections between art, culture, creativity, identity, and well-being. So we're going to ask you two questions, and the first one is what particular aspects of Creative Ireland appeal to you and why. We're not looking just, it looks like a very loaded question, but what we're interested in, we have limited time, limited resources, there's huge pressure to do things. What do you think are the things that we should really focus on? What elements of the programme should we really focus on, and why? And then the second question is what can be done here in Fingal to make it happen?